A few years ago, I posted my story, "What Are You Looking at Me For?" in which I talked about being a terrible skeptic. But after another story that happened to me and my mom, the degree of my skepticism was lowered quite a bit, and the case was like this. Mom decided to earn a little money and agreed to the proposal to carry out a general cleaning in a well-known cafe in our city. The work was that overnight it was necessary to clean the kitchen and floors in the institution. Offered a decent payment. It was necessary to arrive at the closing of the cafe, stay overnight, do the work, and in the morning to get paid and quietly go about their business. By 23:00, Mom arrived at the cafe. The administrator explained everything, gave cleaning products, rags, mops, and a little nervous, said that you can go everywhere except one room, an empty basement room, a long corridor with one light bulb. The receptionist opened the door, showed me, and immediately closed it. "Please just don't go here, you don't need to." For what purpose this room was unclear, but Mom did not ask questions. She went straight to work. It should be said that the kitchen in the cafe is on the basement floor. There are accountants and administrative staff. When the time began to approach 0000, my mom noticed that the staff is trying to leave work in a hurry, all literally pushing each other. Broke upstairs on the way out. Mom went upstairs with everyone, clarified a couple of questions. The receptionist closed the door and said good night, saying that Mom could call anytime if anything. Why, what if anything? You have alarms all over the place. Go on, don't worry. But she started to worry herself and called me. "Masha, you can come to the cafe right now, there's something wrong here." I knew my mom was working there today. The cafe is 1 block away from my house. I got ready quickly, and on the way I called my mom one more time. In the phone I heard her trembling voice, "Can you hurry up? There's something not normal here." I was very scared. I thought she was getting sick and ran. 5 minutes later I was there. I ran up to the doors of the cafe. They were completely glass. I see my mom standing inside with her bags and things next to her, and she's all pale. I try to ask what happened, but the glass of the door is thick. I can't hear anything. I dial the number, and my mom says in a broken voice, "I'm not staying here for a minute, not for any money. The receptionist is coming right now." I called her. They all left. I sat downstairs at the table, started to change my shoes. I bent over. Ahead of me is a door to an empty room that the receptionist had closed. And then I see that the handle starts to turn. "Masha, you see," I look, and the round knob is turning by itself. I said, "Mom, maybe it's just imagined? Or maybe there's someone there, and it's such a stupid joke and they're filming everything and laughing afterwards." She even got mad. "I'm not crazy yet. I'm telling you." The knob was spinning. I still have my cigarettes down there, but I'm not going down there. And imagine this, people. I'm standing outside the glass doors of a cafe on the street at night. I see my mom locked inside. I'm talking to her on the phone, trying to turn it into a joke. And then we both hear the dish dryer downstairs turn on, which had been turned off. Mom screamed, "Where is that receptionist?" My heart is about to give out. I started joking. "Why don't you go downstairs for cigarettes?" Mom said. "Fuck you." And at that time I saw that from the lower floor behind my mom's back, some kind of blob that looked like smoke was rising. My first thought was that something was burning, but then I realized it was something else. A shape-changing, dense lump of dark color. My throat was dry, I was numb. I said something to my mom about cigarettes and things. I watched the mass move. It lasted about a minute, and I could clearly see something crawling from the basement up to the door where my mom was standing. And then a cab pulled up with the receptionist. She jumped up to the door, opened it, and let my mom out. I said, "What the hell are they doing here?" The receptionist didn't say anything. A guy got out of the car, who turned out to be the chef, and he said, "Weren't you warned?" "Yeah, there's something going on here. We call her Lenachka. She's an occasional bully." Mom said only one thing. "You guys are crazy. You should be warned." I would not agree in my life. "So no one agrees, many people know about it, and general cleaning should be done," replied the administrator. "It's nothing personal. It's just business." We packed up and went home. What I saw behind her back, my mother does not know to this day. Here. "3 weeks before the wedding, My fiance crashed his motorcycle. When I heard the news, I lost my senses. My parents called an ambulance, and the doctor, seeing that I did not regain consciousness, insisted on my hospitalization. I was unconscious for almost 3 days. My condition was aggravated by pregnancy, which at that time my mother did not know about. My parents were very strict, and I hid my pregnancy from them in every possible way, hoping for my forthcoming marriage to Volodya. They buried my soulmate without me, because during the funeral I was still unconscious. Before I woke up, I fell into a strange state of either sleep, or I saw a lot of things that I could not actually see, because at that time I was lying in the ward. There was a funeral procession going down our street. The coffin with Max's body was carried by his friends, our former classmates. I also saw Max's mom being led by the hand. She could hardly move her legs, and they gave her absorbent cotton with ammonia. Then the procession stopped because Max's mom fell down. I saw the EMT giving her an injection. The second time she fell was when the coffin with Max's body was being lowered into the grave. My mom came into my field of vision, standing next to my dad. She was wearing a dark green dress and a black scarf. My mother was crying, and my father was wiping her tears and saying something quietly. The horror of what I saw overwhelmed me with such force that I woke up, as it happens in the most nightmarish dreams. The baby, feeling my condition, was beating in my stomach, and I put my palm on my stomach and thought bitterly that my unborn baby would never know the caresses of his father. A nurse came in and, seeing that I was awake, ran to get a doctor. A week later I came home and asked to tell my mom about how my fiancé was buried, promising her I wouldn't cry. When my mom told me that Max's mother had passed out twice, I asked her what she had been wearing at the funeral. My mom said she wore a dark green dress because she didn't have any proper clothes. The more my mom told me, the more I became convinced that this is exactly how I saw things while unconscious. On the 9th day of the wake, I was at my fiancé's parents' house. Max's mom urged me to spend the night. I couldn't refuse her and called my mom, letting her know I would be staying at Max's house. Late in the evening, when everyone who had come to the wake had gone home, Max's mom was hysterical. She was banging her head and screaming that she had no one to live for, that now she had no son and would never have grandchildren again. I didn't tell her about my pregnancy because I didn't know if I should give birth to a child alone without my husband. The ambulance came, the doctors gave my mom a shot, and she soon fell asleep. The lack of sleep of those bitter days and the sedative medication did their job, but I couldn't sleep for a long time. I guess I had had enough of lying down and sleeping in the hospital. When I finally fell asleep, someone shook me by the shoulder. I looked up and you saw Max. He gestured for me to be quiet, and I nodded in response. You won't believe it. I, who had always considered myself a coward, was not a bit afraid of the appearance of the one we had been remembering for the 9th day a few hours ago. There was no light in the room, and only the faint light of the moon shone through the window. Nevertheless, I could see not only the outline of his body, but also his face. For a while we stared at each other in silence. I couldn't bear the silence, but for some reason I asked, "What should I do with the child?" "My mother will kill me for sleeping with you before we were married. And why did I give in to your promises? I'll marry you, but how will you marry me now?" I looked at my dead fiancé and talked to him the way one usually talks to a picture of a dead person, expressing to it one's grievances and hopes. I needed to speak to someone about my feminine distress. An incomprehensible resentment pressed upon me, for willingly or unwillingly, I had been deceived by my fiancé. It was bitter that I would not be able to wear my wedding dress and veil, and now I would have to justify myself to my parents for not keeping my chastity before the wedding. I needed to talk about my hurt and distress, and I had just the right listener. When I told him everything that was so burning in my chest, he said long, and with a kind of tear, "Don't have an abortion, we will have a boy. My only son, my mom's grandson. Please don't kill my baby. I'm not married. Do you even realize that? Who am I having a baby for if I'm not even married? Marry me, and then I'll keep your baby." And then my fiancé told me, "Tomorrow you'll come with me and I'll marry you, as I promised." Pity and love rushed to my heart. I held out my hands to him, and he immediately disappeared. I'm going crazy, I thought, and reached for the table lamp. All the rest of the night I slept with the light on, and the next day the most incredible thing happened. Or rather, the day passed as usual. But at night, at about 2 o'clock, I was awakened again by my fiancé. He told me to hurry up, get dressed, they are waiting for us to get engaged. He helped me put on my wedding dress, as I alone would never have been able to lace up my corset with its many buttons and clasps. The dress was very beautiful, with a long skirt with a hoop made of wire at the hem. Volodya corrected my veil, took me under his arm, and we went with him. I had no thoughts of where and why we were going. I repeat that I really believed that my wedding should take place. People came up to us, a lot of them, old and young. They all congratulated us and wished us happiness and love. I extended my hand to Volodya at the request of some elder in a vesture, and my fiancé put a ring on my finger. Suddenly someone shouted angrily, "What are you doing here? I'm going to call the police." I looked around and saw that I was standing near the grave. It was already light, and my eyes could distinguish Volodin's portrait on the monument. In front of me stood a man, apparently a watchman. My wedding dress was in mud and clay. It had rained the day before. I brought my hand up to my eyes and saw the wedding ring my fiancé was buying me. Realizing that I was out of it, the watchman softened his tone and offered to take me home. I agreed. While we were driving, the man kept talking and talking about his job. He told me that during his time as a watchman, he had seen a lot of things. Finally, his car stopped outside my house. I pushed the door open and realized it wasn't locked. Either I ran away in a frenzy and didn't lock it, or my mother didn't lock it. I still don't know that. I didn't tell my mother about my sleepover at the cemetery. She didn't ask me anything either, so she didn't know about anything. The next day, I called Max's mother and asked her where the ring that Max had bought for our wedding was. She said, "I put them in his coffin under his pillow." I had to admit to my mom that I was pregnant. My parents didn't scold me, and Max's mom is nothing to talk about. There's no one she cares about more than my son now. That day, when I called Max's mom to ask her about the rings, she told me that she had a dream where Max and I were married, but for some reason we were married by the priest who was buried not far from Max's grave. She had had this dream on the very day that I had been at the cemetery, for some unknown reason.